and welcome to the Quality Coaching Roadshow with your hosts Margaret Deneen and Anne-Marie Jarrett. Together we're interviewing people from all over the world to better understand what quality means to them and how they drive a quality mindset in their organisations. So, let's get the show on the road. This is Margaret Deneen from 3 West Street, and today I have the pleasure of speaking to Joao Proenca, who's based in Lisbon, and he's working with a company called Outsystems. Morning, Joao. How are you doing?
Good morning, Mags. I'm doing great. What about you?
I'm doing very well this morning. I'm delighted that you agreed to come on the podcast with me.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So, Joao, you're a quality owner / quality coach with Outsystems.
Yes.
Would you like to tell me a little bit about where you work?
Yeah, so my company, Outsystems, we provide a low-code development platform. Low-code is an area in software engineering that's really growing right now throughout the world. It's essentially, we provide a platform that enables our customers through a visual programming language to build and change web and mobile applications really fast. It's like a higher level of abstraction that allows them to focus more on business needs and really takes a lot of the overhead you get with lower level languages when trying to build those. And we've been quite successful in doing it. So essentially, there's a big R&D department with more than 150 engineers working on our product. Each team has its own different domain inside the product itself, because we're talking about a platform that has an IDE, that has a compiler, that is serving our customers through the cloud, that enables them to build mobile applications. So there are microservices underneath that allow one to have a mobile build to put on the App Store or something like that. So all of these are very different domains in terms of this big product that we have. And I am a quality owner. What this means is that we have this approach. We have a whole team responsibility approach towards quality and towards testing inside our R&D teams. So it's not that we don't believe that dedicated testers should not exist, but we don't have a lot of them around. We do have quality owners such as myself, and we work as the strategists and mostly the enablers inside of each team in order for them to be able to conduct all activities related to quality. So, for instance, knowing how to assess and evaluate risk, understanding different testing techniques, which frameworks are better for different sorts of testing problems, you name it. All of those things that are in the testing space, we are there to make them knowledgeable in these fields rather than just provide testing to them as something that we do.
Okay, so how did that come about? Because I really like the word enabler. It sounds an awful lot better than enforcer.
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
Well, so there's a big story here because Outsystems has been around for 18 years, I think. And when I first joined, it was 2007, so 12 years ago mostly. And I entered the company as a quality assurance engineer. And in those days, we didn't have this whole team approach to quality and testing yet. We saw it in the more classical sense where teams had developers and then there was 1 or 2 testers. And whenever developers would finish their work, they would pass whatever they had developed to the testers in order for it to be tested. Over the years, we started seeing a few problems with this model. And most of it boils down to the fact that there wasn't a common quality mindset along the whole organization, along all of the different roles. But what happened a lot was, for instance, I would receive new features that I had to test, and and I would find some bugs in them that were pretty basic, because developers essentially figured that testing wasn't exactly their responsibility, and that was there to do that sort of thing. Another thing that we also suffered from this sort of from this way we were addressing quality as testing was in terms of automation, because we really hurt in terms of the testability of everything that we were developing, because since developers weren't really concerned with testing, they also didn't make their designs and architectures reflect testability principles that have to be followed. So a lot of times it was kind of up to us, to testers, to try to influence them, but that was a bit hard.
You're a master of understatement there, Joao.
Yeah. So and of course that there were symptoms of all of these problems that became more evident as time went by, and eventually we reached the stage where we made this shift where okay, so we're going to see this in a different way. We're going to convert quality assurance engineers into software engineers with a more broader responsibility, and then we'll see what happens. What eventually happened during those years was that the whole DevOps revolution was also happening throughout the world. DevOps was becoming mainstream, and a lot of those principles started getting into our organization as well. And that made us go through a lot of important transformations. For instance, we started putting our first CI/CD pipelines into place. We started really investing on doing continuous integration, and one of the big things that we did was shifting completely into a trunk-based development model, which was scary, but at the same time really challenging. And nowadays we're really happy with the fact that we're doing it, and that made us like overcome a lot of challenges and modernize ourselves in a lot of ways. But at the same time, we also started figuring that this whole idea of a whole team responsibility towards stressing and quality was probably a good idea, but we couldn't expect software developers or software engineers to become adepts at this practice all by themselves. And this was the moment when we decided that we needed a quality group inside of R&D and create this quality owner role that would be inside teams to enable them in all of these different concerns. So that was kind of the story that happened. So this happened in 2017, beginning of 2017. The first quality owner, which was me, started working in that specific role. At the same time, the head of quality entered the company, Joao, coming from Microsoft, where he had been exposed to a lot of the modern testing principles. And that whole philosophy that really tied in well with what we wanted to accomplish. And ever since, this group of people has been growing. We're kind of like 9 to 10 quality owners right now, and still we're not enough. So we're still trying to grow the team, since we have a lot of engineers and teams inside of R&D.
So what are the main changes that you've seen come about, particularly, I guess, changes amongst the software engineers in the teams? What are they doing differently now to what they were doing before?
So, of course, that different teams inside such an organization will be in different moments of their own life. So, and we sometimes talk a bit about maturity levels for teams. Some teams are really still at those basic levels where they're still trying to figure out the basics about software testing and quality. Others are a bit more advanced. The teams I've been working with the most are in that most advanced stage right now. And what I see that's really different than from like 12 years ago was that they are really autonomous in a lot of the things regarding testing. So, for instance, they know that each story that they are building inside a sprint should encompass both development and testing. So it's always something that's being considered in each story. A lot of the things comes directly from the team, so I don't need to be there in order for them to have certain discussions around the risks that they are facing as they are building new features into the product or as they are facing a new challenge.
In terms of the techniques that the software engineers are now using that they weren't using a few years ago, are there any techniques that have been very beneficial?
One of the things that has really caught up in recent years, especially since we gotten through this whole team approach regarding quality and testing, was that we started having at the core of our quality strategy dogfooding as being a very important part. And if you think about it, I mean, if listeners don't know what dogfooding is, it's when a company uses its own product or services as a way to exercise them and benefit from that. So for instance, if I'm looking at CI/CD results, I'm doing that through an Outsystems application. If I'm submitting vacations, submitting timesheets, all of these different things are done through apps that are built by other teams in a different department of Outsystems, but they are using the product. And we set up what we call different dogfooding rings throughout our release strategy, where a lot of the things, before they reach production, before they reach our first customers, they are going through these rings where teams are actively every day using the product to build new features into their own apps, and we are able to catch a lot of those long tail scenario things that are hard to test or hard to figure in such a complex product. And we are able to catch a lot of those by having new releases going in through these dogfooding rings. And for us, these dogfooding rings a lot of times are already seen as production for us. So whenever we say we have continuous integration and continuous delivery for us a lot of times is already delivering to these internal teams. And it's essentially, if you think about risk, I mean, risk is always a possible negative impact and the probability of it happening. This way we are kind of like lowering the impact of something bad happening, because if it happens inside the organization and not outside to our customers, and we are able to react faster because it's happening to the people next door in another department.
Yes, I think that's very beneficial, because as long as it happens within your own four walls,
yes,
that's good. And I guess from another perspective, if it happens within your four walls, you have to address it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, on the subject of risk, you mentioned that you use various techniques in order to talk about risk and make risk visible in your organization. Would you like to talk about some of them?
Yes, this is something that has been really catching on for the last year through quality owners in my organization. So one of the things we have been doing throughout since 2017 is trying to build risk maps for each team, where essentially we try to map out the risks that the team is currently facing in terms of quality, so that then and then we support the discussions that we have with what we call team captains and dev managers. All of the discussions that we have around quality and testing and the things that we are focusing on as quality owners, we support those in those risk maps. But after a while, one of the things that for me particularly was kind of something that I wanted to research was, okay, but a lot of people talk about risk in software engineering, but I rarely see anyone providing me with a format for one to assess risk, for one to find out about risks. I mean, it's one of those things where it's basically futurology. You're trying to figure out what can go wrong in the future, and usually I believe that's very hard for a human being to do in whatever domain we are talking about. About a year ago, I contacted Baron van Dijk, who is one of the creators of Risk Storming. He gave me the basics. I conducted my first risk storming inside of R&D to see if it would be beneficial for us. That first session led to a second session with a different team, and so on and so on. And all of a sudden, it just became viral. I mean, if we go back to what I was saying about our risk maps, sometimes you will be mapping out certain risks that are more related to the team. So, for instance, the team needs to learn more about automated testing because they don't have a lot of experience there, and so that's one of the risk factors. The team needs to become better at this. But then some of the risks are more related to some of the initiatives and some of the epic features that we're building into the product. And sometimes inside a risk map, you would see this little box where, well, we're going to address this project, and right now we have no